You'll pay for this. I'll own you. I'll own this whole rotten neighborhood. That's what she screamed. Her voice was shrill, cracking like thin ice over a deep, dark lake. The sound bounced off the beige stucco walls of the community clubhouse, a place that was supposed to be for potlucks and holiday parties. Tonight, it was a courtroom. And she was the one on trial. The clink of the handcuffs was surprisingly quiet, but it echoed in the dead silence that followed her outburst. Everyone just stared. Neighbors I'd only ever nodded to were frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and a little bit of what looked like relief. She, Carol, the self-appointed queen of our little suburban kingdom, looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair was coming undone, and her makeup was starting to run. She wasn't the untouchable president of the Homeowners Association anymore. She was just a cornered animal. I didn't say anything. I just stood there by the projector screen, the remote for the slideshow still in my hand. I gave her a small, simple nod. It wasn't triumphant. It was just final. As the officers led her out into the flashing blue and red lights that painted our perfect little street in shades of emergency, I thought back to how it all started. It wasn't with handcuffs or fraud or public humiliation. It started with my truck. My beautiful, painstakingly restored, 1968 Ford F-100. A truck that was worth more than her house and her pride combined. She just didn't know it yet. The move into my parents' old house was supposed to be a quiet retreat, a final chapter. My wife, Sarah, had passed away the year before after a long fight that had left us both exhausted. The big city house we'd built our lives in suddenly felt cavernous, each empty room a monument to what I'd lost. So I came back here, to the house I grew up in. A simple, sturdy brick ranch in a neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. The name was fancier than the place itself. It was a typical slice of suburbia, built in the 90s, with manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. My parents had loved it. They found the strict rules of the HOA comforting, a guarantee that things would always be neat and tidy. For me, it was just supposed to be quiet. I was a retired structural engineer. My entire career had been about stress calculations, load-bearing walls, and making sure things didn't fall down. I was done with stress. I just wanted to tinker in the garage, read books, and enjoy the peace. The centerpiece of that plan was my truck. It was a deep, lustrous cherry red, the kind of color you could fall into. My dad and I had started restoring it when I was in high school. It was a rust bucket we'd dragged out of a farmer's field. Over 30 years, piece by piece, we'd brought it back to life. After he passed, I finished it. Every nut and bolt was perfect. The engine, a rebuilt 390 V8, purred like a contented lion. The interior smelled of fresh leather and old memories. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a testament. It was the last thing my dad and I built together. It was priceless to me, but it also had a real-world value that would surprise most people. At a recent classic car auction, a similar model in worse condition had sold for a staggering sum. I wasn't a car guy in the traditional sense. I was an engineer. I appreciated the design, the mechanics, the elegant simplicity of a machine built to last. The truck was a piece of rolling history, and it was mine. On the third day after I moved in, I met Carol. I was in the driveway, giving the truck its weekly polish. The chrome on the grille gleamed so brightly it hurt to look at. A pristine, white luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. The window hummed down, and a woman with a helmet of blonde hair and sunglasses the size of dinner plates looked out at me. "You must be the new owner," she said. It wasn't a question. Her tone was flat, like she was taking inventory. "I am," I said, offering a friendly smile. "Frank Miller. My parents, John and Mary, lived here." "I know," she said, her eyes not on me, but scanning my property. "I'm Carol, the president of the HOA," she said, president like it was a royal title. "I see you've brought a work vehicle with you." Her gaze fell upon my Ford F-100. Her lips pursed into a thin line of disapproval, as if she'd just smelled sour milk. I chuckled. "It's not really a work truck anymore. More of a hobby." "A hobby," she repeated slowly, tasting the word and finding it disagreeable. "Well, Frank, Willow Creek Estates has certain standards." We don't allow commercial vehicles, trailers, or derelict cars to be parked in view of the street. It lowers property values. I looked at my truck. It was cleaner than her car. There wasn't a speck of dust on it. The paint was flawless. I can assure you, it's not derelict, I said, my smile tightening just a little. It's a classic. It's an old truck, she countered, her voice taking on a condescending edge, the kind a teacher uses on a particularly slow child. And it's an eyesore. You'll need to store it in your garage or at an off-site facility. It can't be parked in the driveway. I glanced at my garage. It was full of boxes I still needed to unpack, along with a lifetime of my parents' possessions. I'll be clearing out the garage soon, I said reasonably. It'll just be a week or two. You have 48 hours, she said, the fake pleasantry gone from her voice. I'll be sending you the official violation notice this afternoon. Welcome to the neighborhood. The window hummed back up, sealing her inside her climate-controlled bubble. The white sedan pulled away silently, leaving me standing in my own driveway, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and annoyance. An eyesore. My truck. I looked at the gleaming red paint, the polished chrome, the tangible result of decades of love and labor. And I looked at the cookie-cutter beige houses all lined up in a row. I had a feeling my definition of beauty and Carol's were never going to align. I had no idea that this ridiculous, petty complaint was the first tremor before a full-blown earthquake. I was a man who craved peace, but I had just moved into the personal fiefdom of a tyrant. And she had just made the colossal mistake of declaring war on the one thing I wasn't willing to lose. The official notice arrived in my mailbox the next day, as promised. It was printed on thick, cream-colored paper with the Willow Creek Estates HOA letterhead embossed at the top. It looked more serious than my discharge papers from the Army. The violation was cited as parking of an unapproved vehicle, antique/commercial/work truck, in public view. The fine was $50, with a note that it would double for every day the violation was not corrected. $50. It wasn't the money. It was the principle. It was the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it. I was a grown man, on my own property, and this woman was fining me for parking my own vehicle in my own driveway. My first instinct was to comply. Just move the truck. Clear the garage faster. It was the path of least resistance, the path to the quiet life I wanted. That's what Sarah would have told me to do. Just let it go, Frank, she would have said. It's not worth the fight. But Sarah wasn't here. And this wasn't just about a truck. It was about a bully. I dealt with bullies on construction sites my whole life, big, loud men who tried to intimidate you into cutting corners. You learn quickly that if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and then the whole structure comes down. So, I decided to take a different approach. Reason. Logic. Surely, the other members of the HOA board were reasonable people. The next monthly meeting was that Thursday. I put on a decent shirt, tucked the violation notice into my pocket, and walked down to the clubhouse. The room was sterile and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. About 15 people were scattered in folding chairs. At the front, at a long plastic table, sat Carol, flanked by 2 other board members who looked profoundly bored, and a woman who was taking minutes with ferocious intensity. Carol ran the meeting with an iron fist. She steamrolled through the agenda, budget approvals, landscaping complaints, a heated debate about the acceptable shade of beige for mailbox posts. When she finally opened the floor for new business, I raised my hand. Yes, Frank, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured patience. I stood up. I'm Frank Miller from 124 Chestnut Drive. I received a violation notice this week regarding my vehicle, and I'd like to appeal it. I explained the situation calmly and rationally. I described the truck, its condition, and its sentimental value. I even passed around a few photos I'd printed, showing it gleaming at a car show where it had won a blue ribbon. As you can see, I concluded, it's not a derelict vehicle. It's a meticulously maintained classic. The bylaws mention commercial and derelict vehicles, but this fits neither category. I believe the violation was issued in error. A few people in the audience murmured, looking at the pictures with interest. One of the board members, a man named George, actually looked impressed. That's a beautiful truck, Frank, he said. Carol shot him a look that could curdle milk. George, the bylaws also give the board discretion to maintain the aesthetic harmony of the community. A rusty old farm truck, regardless of how shiny you polish it, does not fit the aesthetic of Willow Creek Estates. It's not rusty, I said, my voice still level. There isn't a spot of rust on it. It's a subjective judgment, Frank, and as president, I'm making it, she said dismissively. The violation stands. Is there any other new business? And that was it. My appeal was denied without a vote, without discussion. I was gavelled into silence. I sat back down, the photos of my truck feeling flimsy in my hand. The message was clear, logic didn't matter. The rules were whatever Carol decided they were. The fines kept coming. Every day, a new envelope in my mailbox. $50. Then $100. Then $200. The total was climbing into the thousands. I didn't pay them. I just filed them neatly in a folder labeled HOA Tyranny. Carol's campaign escalated. A week later, a notice appeared on the community bulletin board. It didn't mention me by name, but it didn't have to. A friendly reminder to all residents, it read, that maintaining the visual appeal of our neighborhood is a shared responsibility. Unsightly vehicles, cluttered yards, and unapproved modifications detract from everyone's property values. Let's all do our part to keep Willow Creek beautiful. Then came the phone calls. The city's code enforcement office. An anonymous complaint had been filed about a derelict vehicle at my address. An officer, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, showed up. He took one look at my truck. "This is the derelict vehicle?" he asked, walking around it with a look of admiration. "Man, this thing is cherry." "What is that, a 68? "It is," I said. He shook his head and laughed. "Some people have too much time on their hands. Sorry to bother you, sir. We'll be closing this complaint. Have a nice day." He knew. I knew. We both knew exactly where the anonymous complaint had come from. Carol was trying to use outside authorities to do her dirty work. It had backfired. This small victory felt good, but I knew it would only make her angrier. I was right. The turning point, the moment this went from a frustrating annoyance to a full-blown war, came on a Saturday afternoon. My daughter, Emily, had come to visit with my grandson, Leo. Leo was 5, a whirlwind of energy and laughter. He loved the truck. He called it Grandpa's Big Red Monster. We were in the front yard, getting ready to go for a drive to get ice cream. Leo was helping me polish the hubcaps. Emily was sitting on the porch steps, smiling as she watched us. It was a perfect, peaceful moment. Then Carol's white sedan cruised by, slowing to a crawl as it passed my house. The window was down. She stared at us, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't say anything, just let her hateful gaze linger on my family, on my grandson. Emily felt it. Her smile faded. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "That's Carol," I said, my voice tight. "The HOA president. She doesn't like my truck." "She looks like she doesn't like anything," Emily murmured. The car drove off. We tried to recapture the happy mood, but the poison had already seeped in. Her silent, drive-by judgment had tainted the afternoon. The final, irrevocable line was crossed that night. After Emily and Leo left, I went out to put the truck cover on. It was getting dark, and the streetlights were just beginning to hum to life. As I walked along the passenger side, my hand brushed against the door. I felt a sharp, rough line in the impossibly smooth paint. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. My breath caught in my throat. A deep, jagged scratch ran the entire length of the truck, from the front fender, across the door, all the way to the rear quarter panel. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, gouged deep into the metal with a key or a screwdriver. The straightness of it, the vicious pressure, it was pure malice. Years of work. Countless hours of sanding, priming, painting. The custom cherry red paint that had cost a small fortune. All of it ruined in a single, hateful act of vandalism. I stood there in the dark, my flashlight beam tracing the ugly scar. This wasn't about a bylaw anymore. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was a personal attack. She had seen me with my family, seen a moment of happiness, and she had decided to destroy it. She had vandalized not just my property, but my history. My connection to my father. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The patient, peace-seeking man who had moved to Willow Creek Estates died right there in the driveway. An engineer took his place. A man who understood that when a structure is rotten, you don't patch it. You bring it down to the foundation. My quest for a quiet life was over. Carol had started a war. Now, I was going to finish it. My way. The next morning, I didn't call the police. A vandalism report on an old truck with no witnesses. It would go nowhere. It would be my word against hers, and she was the established community leader. No, a direct assault was not the answer. This required strategy. It required precision. I went into my home office and pulled out a fresh legal pad. At the top, I wrote in neat, block letters, Project Teardown. The engineer in me took over. Every project starts with a plan, with research. My first step was to understand the structure I was up against. I downloaded the complete set of HOA bylaws, covenants, and restrictions. It was a 200-page document filled with dense legalese. I spent the entire day reading it, highlighting sections, making notes in the margins. I read it not as a homeowner, but as an opposing counsel, looking for loopholes, contradictions, and overreaches of authority. I found several. The rules on vehicles were vaguely worded, relying heavily on the board's discretion. The fine structure she was using was not explicitly laid out and was likely unenforceable. But these were small cracks. I was looking for a foundational weakness. My next step was public records. I spent hours online, digging into the county clerk's office, property records, and business filings. I looked up the HOA as a corporation. I pulled the names of all current and past board members. And I looked up Carol. Carol Henderson. Lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. HOA president for the last 10. Her husband, Richard, was a sales manager at a luxury car dealership, which explained the pristine sedan. They lived in one of the largest executive models in the development. On the surface, everything looked normal. But a good engineer knows the most critical flaws are often hidden. My plan needed its own infrastructure. The scratch on my truck was an act of covert aggression. I would respond with covert observation. That afternoon, I ordered a state-of-the-art security system. Not just a doorbell camera, but 4 high-resolution, night vision-capable cameras. One covering the driveway and the truck. One covering the front porch and lawn. One aimed down the street in each direction. They would be professionally installed and discreet. I wanted a complete, 24/7 record of everything that happened on or near my property. All footage would be backed up to a secure cloud server, untouchable. While I waited for the cameras, I started my investigation into the HOA's finances. As a homeowner, I was entitled to review them. I sent a formal, certified letter to the board requesting copies of the last 5 years of budgets, expense reports, and bank statements. It was my right, but I knew the request would be seen as an act of aggression. Carol's response came a week later. A curt email informing me that I could make an appointment to view the records in person at the clubhouse, for a maximum of 1 hour, and that no copies or photographs were permitted. It was textbook obstruction. She was following the letter of the law while making it as difficult as possible for me to find anything. Fine. If she wanted to play games, I could play, too. I scheduled my 1-hour appointment. I showed up with a notepad and a pen. The secretary, a nervous woman named Brenda, sat me at a table with a mountain of binders. The clock was ticking. I couldn't possibly go through 5 years of records in an hour. So I didn't try. I focused on one thing: vendor payments. Specifically, the biggest line item in the budget: landscaping and grounds maintenance. The contractor for the past 2 years was a company called Evergreen Solutions LLC. The payments to them were enormous, far more than what our previous, well-regarded contractor had charged. The invoices were vague: grounds maintenance, seasonal planting, tree trimming. The numbers were round and suspiciously consistent. My hour was up before I could dig deeper. But I had a name. That night, I did a business search for Evergreen Solutions LLC. It was a new company, formed just over 2 years ago, right when they got the lucrative HOA contract. The registered agent and sole officer listed was a man named Martin Gable. The name meant nothing to me. But a little more digging, a cross-reference on social media, gave me the connection I was looking for. Martin Gable was Carol Henderson's brother-in-law. I felt a cold thrill, the kind you get when you tap on a wall and hear a hollow space behind it. This was it. This was the foundational weakness. Nepotism was ugly, but not necessarily illegal. But inflated contracts, kickbacks, that was a different story. That was fraud. I had a theory, but I needed proof. My 1-hour peek at the books wasn't enough. I needed my own copies. I needed an expert. I called my old friend Dave. Dave was a forensic accountant, a guy who could make a spreadsheet sing like a canary. We'd worked together on a few construction projects where developers had tried to cook the books. Dave was a bloodhound when it came to money. "Frank, my boy. How's retirement?" he boomed over the phone. I told him the whole story. The truck, the fines, the HOA president, the scratch, and my suspicions about the landscaping contract. Dave was silent for a moment. Then he let out a low whistle. "Frankie, you didn't retire. You just found a new project. This has all the classic signs. Overinflated contracts with a related party. That's embezzlement 101-inch. I know, but I need proof, Dave. And she's stonewalling me on the records." "Don't you worry about that," Dave said, a grin in his voice. "There are other ways. Any other large, unusual expenses you noticed?" I didn't have time to look, I said. But I did notice something else. On the property maps, there's a strip of grass between my driveway and the street. Carol loves to park there to watch my house. But according to the county plat map, it isn't HOA common ground. It's an old, unrecorded city utility easement. Dave chuckled. "Poetic justice, my friend. You can probably fence it off. Nothing says, 'Get off my lawn,' like an actual fence. But let's focus on the money first. That's where the real bodies are buried. Send me everything you have. I'll start digging on my end." The cameras were installed the next day. They were small, almost invisible, tucked under the eaves of the roof. But their view was panoramic. My property was now a fortress of observation. I put up a couple of small, tasteful signs on the lawn, 24-hour video surveillance in use. I wanted her to see them. I wanted her to know I was watching back. The trap was now set. I had my surveillance. I had my expert looking into the money. And I had my little ace in the hole, the city easement. I continued to park my truck in the driveway, a gleaming red bait. Now, all I had to do was wait for the queen to make a mistake. It didn't take long. Carol was rattled. The surveillance signs were a direct challenge to her authority. I saw her drive by even more frequently, her head swiveling to look at the new cameras. She was trying to intimidate me, but the constant presence of her car only confirmed my suspicion that her obsession with me was personal. The fines stopped coming. Instead, a new letter arrived. This one was from the HOA's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, accusing me of harassing Carol by installing intrusive surveillance equipment aimed at her property. It was absurd. My cameras were aimed at my own property. Her house was across the street and 2 doors down, completely out of frame. The letter was a bluff, a scare tactic. I filed it away in my folder. She was getting sloppy, letting her anger override her strategy. And that's when she made her critical error. It happened on a Tuesday night, just after 2 a.m. I was asleep, but my cameras were not. The motion sensor on the front lawn camera was triggered. The infrared night vision clicked on, flooding the footage with an eerie, black and white light. The recording showed Carol's white sedan parking down the street. A figure emerged, cloaked in a dark hooded sweatshirt. The figure scurried across the street, moving quickly and furtively through the shadows. As the person stepped onto my lawn, their face came into clear view under the infrared light. It was Carol. Her expression was a twisted mask of rage. In her hands, she carried a sign. She walked right up to the middle of my yard and jammed the sign into the soft turf. It was one of those cheap, corrugated plastic signs. On it, in big, bold letters, were the words, "For sale by owner, needs work." She stood back for a moment to admire her handiwork, a cruel smirk on her face. Then she turned and scurried back to her car, disappearing into the night. I woke up the next morning and saw it. My first reaction was a flash of hot anger. My second was a cold, deep satisfaction. I've got you. I didn't touch the sign. I left it right there in the middle of my lawn for all the neighbors to see as they left for work. I let it sit there like a monument to her pettiness. Then I went to my computer, downloaded the video file, and saved it to a dozen different places. I had her. Red-handed. Trespassing and vandalism, clear as day. It was the first piece of hard, undeniable evidence. The first steel beam in the case I was building against her. The next HOA meeting was a week away. I didn't file a police report. I didn't confront her. I waited. Patience is a weapon the impatient don't understand. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was more crowded than usual. The "for sale" sign on my lawn had become the talk of the neighborhood. People were whispering, casting curious glances my way. Carol, predictably, was the one to bring it up. She opened the new business portion of the meeting with a self-righteous sigh. "As many of you have seen," she began, feigning concern, "it seems our new resident on Chestnut Drive is having some trouble adjusting to our community standards. First the unsightly truck, and now this tacky sign. It's really becoming a blight." She was trying to frame it as my doing, another example of my supposed refusal to comply. It was a bold, shameless lie. I let her finish. I let the murmurs of agreement from her supporters die down. Then, I stood up. "Carol, you're right," I said, my voice calm and steady. The room went quiet. "There is a security issue in our neighborhood that we need to address." I walked to the front of the room, holding a small USB drive. "I've recently installed a security system at my home. Last Tuesday, it captured something I think everyone here needs to see." I handed the drive to Brenda, the secretary. "Could you please play this file on the projector?" Carol's face paled slightly. "What is this?" "This is not on the agenda." "I'm raising it as a security concern," I said smoothly. "Surely the safety of our residents is always on the agenda, isn't it, Madam President?" She was trapped. To refuse would look suspicious. She clenched her jaw and gave a curt nod to Brenda. The video popped up on the large screen behind her. The grainy, black and white footage began to play. It showed my quiet, empty front yard. For a few seconds, nothing happened. I could hear people shifting in their seats, confused. Then, the figure in the hoodie appeared. A collective gasp went through the room as Carol's face, illuminated by the camera's infrared light, became clear. The video showed her marching onto my lawn, jamming the sign into the ground, and smirking with satisfaction. I didn't say a word. I just let the video play on a loop. Carol planting the sign. Carol smirking. Over and over. The silence in the room was absolute. No one dared to breathe. All eyes were on the screen, then on the real Carol, who was standing at the front of the room, her face a ghastly shade of white. She finally broke the silence. "This is a trick," she shrieked, her voice high and ragged. "It's fake. It's a deep fake. He's a tech wizard, he's trying to frame me. He's been harassing me since the day he moved in." Her denial was too frantic, too hysterical. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for support, but she found only stunned, accusing faces. George, the board member who had admired my truck, was staring at her with open disgust. "He's the problem," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "I'm going to sue you for defamation. For harassment. I'll have you run out of this town." Her tirade continued, each word digging her grave a little deeper. She was losing control, her mask of composed authority shattering into a million pieces. For the first time, the neighborhood was seeing the real Carol. Not the diligent president, but the vindictive, unhinged bully. Her credibility was cracked. The foundation was crumbling. But she still held the power of her office. The meeting ended in chaos. She had lost the room, but she wasn't defeated yet. I knew that cornering an animal like Carol didn't make it surrender. It only made it more vicious. I had expected retaliation. I had not expected the level of scorched earth warfare she would wage. Humiliated and exposed, Carol abandoned all pretense of subtlety. She came after me with everything she had. Her first move was to weaponize the neighborhood's private social media page. Overnight, a long, rambling post from her appeared. She accused me of being a dangerous and unstable individual. She twisted the story of the video, claiming I had doctored it as part of a disturbed obsession with her. She used my own security system against me. "This man has installed a network of spy cameras to watch our homes and our children," she wrote. "Who knows what he's recording? He sits alone in that house all day, watching us. It's creepy and it's a threat to our safety." The accusations were vile and baseless. My cameras covered my own property, a fact the video itself made clear. But fear is a powerful motivator. A few of her loyal cronies chimed in with comments of support. "So scary. Thank you for protecting us, Carol. We need to do something about him." My quiet, peaceful street suddenly felt hostile. When I went to get the mail, neighbors who used to wave now averted their eyes or hurried inside. I was being painted as the villain, the neighborhood creep. Then she escalated again. She filed a false police report. 2 officers showed up at my door. They were polite but firm. "Sir, we've received a complaint that you verbally threatened Carol Henderson." I invited them in. I showed them the footage from my front porch camera from the time of the alleged threat. It showed me getting my mail and going back inside. Carol's car was visible driving by, but I was nowhere near her. I never said a word. The officers watched the video, their expressions grim. "This is what we thought," one of them said with a sigh. "Sir, we're sorry to have bothered you. We're going to have a talk with Mrs. Henderson about the legal penalties for filing a false report." They left, but the damage was done. She was trying to create a legal paper trail, to brand me as a harasser in the eyes of the law. She was trying to destroy my name. It was a desperate, vicious attack. And it was exactly the kind of overreach I was hoping for. Every false accusation, every lie she told, was another brick I could use to build her prison. I documented everything, screenshots of the social media posts, a copy of the police visit report. My file was getting thicker. Meanwhile, in the background, Dave was making progress. "I've hit a snag, but it's a good snag," he told me over the phone. "She's cooked the book so thoroughly it's almost impressive. The payments to her brother-in-law's company are just the tip of the iceberg. There are consulting fees paid to a shell corporation, special assessments for projects that never happened. This is a criminal enterprise, Frank." "But can you prove it?" I asked. "I can prove the money is gone. But proving she's the one who took it requires a direct link. A confession, an email, a bank transfer into her personal account. She's been careful. The money flows to her brother-in-law, to the Shell Corp, but not directly to her. We have the smoke, but we need the gun." The smoking gun came from the last place I ever would have expected. It came from inside her own family. A week later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my street address. The email was short. "I think I have information that can help you. I am Martin Gable's wife. Or I was. My name is Susan. Can we talk?" It was the whistleblower. I met Susan at a coffee shop in the next town over. She was a small, nervous woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hands trembled as she held her coffee cup. She was clearly terrified, but also determined. "I can't live with it anymore," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The lies. The stealing. I'm divorcing Martin, and I'm taking both of them down with me." Her story came tumbling out. Her husband, Martin, and her sister, Carol, had been running this scam for years. It wasn't just overbilling. It was outright fraud. They were billing the HOA for phantom work, trees that were never trimmed, flower beds that were never planted, sprinkler systems that were never installed. They would create fake invoices, Carol would approve them, and she and Martin would split the money. It paid for her car, Susan said, her voice laced with bitterness. It paid for their vacations. It paid for her designer clothes. All of it stolen from your neighbors. "Can you prove it?" I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. Susan reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She pushed it across the table. Martin was sloppy. He was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable because his sister ran the show. He kept records. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of bank statements for Evergreen Solutions, showing huge cash withdrawals after every HOA payment. There were printouts of emails between Martin and Carol, discussing which projects to bill for next. "Let's do the mulch project again," one of Carol's emails read. Easy money. And then, the final, undeniable proof. Text messages. A string of them between sister and brother-in-law, arguing over how to split the profits from the last fake invoice. "Carol, my share needs to be bigger. I'm the one taking all the risk." "Martin, you're not taking any risk. You're the queen. Nobody questions you." It was all there. A complete, detailed confession of conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. This wasn't just a smoking gun. This was a cannon. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Susan, looking up from the damning evidence. Her eyes filled with tears. "Because she's a monster. She's bullied me my whole life. She bullied Martin into this scheme. And when I found out and threatened to expose them, she told me she would ruin me, that she would make sure I got nothing in the divorce and that I'd lose my kids. She threatened my children." She took a shaky breath. "I saw what she was doing to you. The lies she was spreading. It was the same pattern. She destroys anyone who stands up to her. I decided I wasn't going to be afraid anymore." I looked at the brave, terrified woman sitting across from me. She was the final piece of the puzzle. "She won't ruin you, Susan," I said, my voice filled with a certainty that surprised even me. "We're going to ruin her." The next day, armed with my thick folder of evidence and Susan's envelope of financial dynamite, I made an appointment. Not with the local police. This was bigger than that. This was wire fraud, mail fraud, a conspiracy involving hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was a job for the district attorney. Dave came with me. We sat in a sterile conference room across from a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor from the Economic Crimes Unit. We laid it all out. My meticulous log of harassment. The video of the sign planting. The screenshots of the social media smears. Dave's forensic accounting report. And finally, Susan's bombshell evidence of the fraud scheme. The prosecutor listened intently, his expression growing more and more grim as we piled document after document onto the table. He read the text messages between Carol and Martin, his eyebrows climbing higher with each line. When we were finished, he was silent for a full minute. He looked at me, then at Dave. "Mr. Miller," he said slowly, "you've done our job for us. This is one of the most well-documented cases of embezzlement I've ever seen." He tapped the pile of evidence. "We're opening a criminal investigation effective immediately. A grand jury will be convened. Warrants will be issued." He paused, a flicker of a smile on his face. "This HOA president of yours, she's going to prison for a very, very long time." The final act needed a stage. I could have just waited for the DA to issue an arrest warrant and for Carol to be quietly taken into custody. But that wasn't enough. Justice, in this case, needed to be public. Her reign of terror was built on public perception, on the fear and compliance of the community. Her downfall had to happen in that same arena. It was Carol herself who provided the venue. Driven by her rage and the belief that she still controlled the narrative, she called a special emergency meeting of the HOA. The official reason, stated in the notice she sent out, was to address the continuing disruptive behavior of the resident at 124 Chestnut Drive and to vote on sanctions, up to and including the forced sale of the property. She was going to try to have me legally evicted from my own home. It was the ultimate power play, a public execution. She thought she was leading me to the gallows. She had no idea she was marching to her own. I called the lead detective on the case. I told him about the meeting. "She's planning to publicly lynch me," I said. "It seems like the perfect opportunity for you to make your arrest. In front of everyone she's victimized." There was a pause on the line. "It's a little unorthodox," the detective said. "But given the circumstances, I think it's beautifully appropriate. We'll be there. Just give us the signal." The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. The air was thick with tension. It felt less like a community gathering and more like a showdown at high noon. I saw fear in some faces, anger in others, and a whole lot of morbid curiosity. I took a seat in the front row. I was calm. I had my laptop in a bag beside me, a short PowerPoint presentation loaded and ready. Dave sat next to me for moral support. In the back of the room, looking like concerned residents, were two plainclothes detectives. Carol entered the room like a conquering hero, flanked by her two remaining loyal board members. She strode to the podium, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. She thought this was her victory lap. She banged the gavel. "This emergency meeting is now in session," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. She launched into a prepared speech, a masterpiece of gaslighting and projection. She painted me as a monster, a threat to the peace and safety of Willow Creek Estates. She recounted her twisted version of events, my unseemly truck, my aggressive behavior at meetings, my illegal surveillance, the doctored video. "This man," she declared, her voice rising with theatrical passion, "is a cancer on our community. He has harassed your president, he has defied our rules, and he has sown division among us. We must cut out this cancer before it spreads." She let her words hang in the air, then moved in for the kill. "I call for a vote to declare the resident of 124 Chestnut Drive a nuisance under Article 9, Section 4 of the bylaws, and to authorize the board to begin legal proceedings for a forced sale of the property." A wave of shock went through the room. Even her supporters looked taken aback by the severity of it. Forcing someone from their home. It was a breathtaking abuse of power. Before anyone could second the motion, I stood up. "Before you vote," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, "I have a short presentation I'd like to make. I believe it will provide some much-needed context." Carol sneered. "We're not here to listen to your lies, Frank. Sit down." "Actually," I said, turning to address the audience, "I think you are. You're here to learn the truth. The truth about where your money has been going." I didn't wait for her permission. I walked to the front, connected my laptop to the projector, and the first slide appeared on the screen behind Carol's head. It was the logo for Evergreen Solutions LLC. "Carol is right about one thing," I began, my voice even and measured. "There is a criminal problem in this neighborhood. A cancer that has been draining this community for years. But it isn't my truck." I clicked to the next slide. It was a chart showing the HOA's landscaping expenses for the last 10 years. The line was flat, then suddenly skyrocketed 2 years ago, right when Evergreen Solutions took over. "This is where your money went," I said. "To a company owned by Carol's brother-in-law." The room erupted in murmurs. Carol's face went from smug to panicked. "These are lies. Slander." I ignored her. I clicked to the next slide. It was a copy of a fake invoice from Evergreen for spring remulching of all common areas. Beside it, I showed a dated photo of a common area from that same week, covered in old, faded wood chips. "The work was never done. They billed you for work they never did," I explained. Over and over again. Slide after slide, I laid it all out. The shell corporation. The consulting fees. The bank statements showing the cash withdrawals. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, and undeniable. Finally, I put up the last slide. It was the text messages between Carol and Martin arguing over their loot. The words appeared huge on the screen for everyone to read. The room was utterly silent. The truth had landed like a physical blow. No one was looking at me anymore. Everyone was staring at Carol, their faces a mixture of horror and betrayal. She was shaking, her eyes wide with terror. She knew it was over. And then, she did what all cornered narcissists do. She snapped. "He's the liar," she shrieked, her voice a raw, desperate scream. "It was all Martin's idea. And my sister. My sister is a lying witch. She never would have known if her stupid husband had kept his mouth shut." It was a full confession, blurted out in a moment of pure, panicked self-preservation. She had just publicly admitted to the conspiracy and the cover-up. That was the signal. The two detectives at the back of the room began to move forward. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. They reached the podium. One of them, a tall, imposing man, spoke in a calm, official voice that cut through the chaos. "Carol Henderson, you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy." He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click seemed to echo in the silent room. That's when she looked at me, her face a grotesque collage of hate and disbelief. That's when she screamed her final, impotent threat. "You'll pay for this. I'll own you. I'll own this whole rotten neighborhood." As they led her away, a disgraced queen being frog marched out of her fallen kingdom, I felt nothing. No joy. No triumph. Just a quiet, profound sense of relief. The storm had finally passed. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The HOA board was dissolved in disgrace. An interim board of shell-shocked but honest residents was formed, and I reluctantly agreed to serve as a temporary advisor to help them untangle the mess Carol had made. We hired a reputable law firm and a new accounting agency. Civil suits were filed, and eventually, a significant portion of the embezzled funds was recovered from Carol and Martin's seized assets. The oppressive and ridiculous bylaws she had instituted were systematically dismantled and rewritten with common sense and a respect for individual property rights. The reign of beige was over. The community began to heal. People started talking to each other again. There were block parties. The oppressive atmosphere of fear and suspicion was replaced by a genuine sense of neighborliness. It turned out that Willow Creek Estates was a pretty nice place to live once the tyrant was gone. As for Carol, her downfall was absolute. Faced with the mountain of evidence, she took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Her husband, Richard, divorced her while she was awaiting sentencing. Her big, beautiful, executive house was sold at auction to help pay the massive restitution she owed the HOA. She lost her power, her money, her family, and her freedom. She lost everything. Her brother-in-law, Martin, was also convicted and received a lesser sentence in exchange for his full testimony against her. Susan, the brave whistleblower, got her divorce, her kids, and her freedom. She moved out of state to start a new life, far from the wreckage of her former family. A few months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I was out in my driveway. The long, ugly scratch on my truck had been repaired. A master craftsman had worked on it for weeks, and now the cherry red paint was flawless again, the scar completely gone. It looked even better than before. I was polishing the chrome grille, the sun warm on my back. My grandson, Leo, was helping again, diligently rubbing a clean cloth on a tire. Emily sat on the porch steps, watching us with a smile. George, the former board member who was now the new, reluctant HOA president, walked by. He waved. "Looking good, Frank," he called out. "You too, George," I replied. He paused and looked at the F-100, gleaming in the driveway. "You know," he said with a chuckle, "I was just looking at the new budget. With all the money we recovered, our reserve fund is healthier than it's ever been. Property values are actually up." He shook his head. "All that fuss she made about your truck lowering our values. Turns out, your truck is the reason this neighborhood was saved." He walked on, and I was left with that thought. Poetic justice. I never wanted a fight. I moved here for peace. But I learned that peace isn't a passive state. Sometimes, you have to fight for it. You have to stand up to the bullies, the tyrants, big and small, who think their power gives them the right to diminish others. You have to be willing to tear down a rotten structure to build something better and stronger in its place. I looked at my truck, a machine of steel and paint and memories. It was a symbol of my past, of my connection to my father. But now, it was something more. It was a symbol of resilience. A reminder that some things are worth defending. Leo looked up at me, his face smudged with tire polish. "Is the monster truck all clean, Grandpa?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Yes, it is, buddy," I said, looking out at the peaceful, quiet street. "It's perfect."